The Whitmore Hotel had hosted 1,000 galas before, but none of the staff would ever forget the night of the Hartwell Foundation dinner. Chandeliers dripped gold light over 300 guests in gowns and tailored suits, string quartets tuning in the corner, and champagne towers catching. The light like something out of a dream nobody in that room could afford to dream twice. Desmond Hartwell, founder of the foundation and owner of half the buildings on that block, stood near the entrance greeting senators, surgeons, and old money families who had known his name for 3 generations. His daughter, Marlo, stood beside him in a deep emerald gown, smiling the practiced smile of a woman who had spent her whole life being watched and had learned, a long time ago, how to disappear behind that smile, even while everyone was looking straight at her. Nobody noticed Ezra Whitlock. That was, in a sense, his job. He moved between tables with a tray balanced on one palm, refilling glasses, clearing plates, murmuring apologies when he had to slide past someone mid-sentence. He had worked banquets like this for 6 years, ever since he'd left the small town of Millhaven, with nothing but a duffel bag and a stubborn refusal to ask his family for help. He was 28 now, quiet in the way that made people assume he had nothing to say, though the truth was he simply preferred to listen. He noticed things. He noticed that the elderly man at table 12 hadn't touched his food because his hands shook too badly to manage the silverware, and quietly brought him a fork he could grip more easily. He noticed that the young violinist looked terrified before her solo, and told her low enough that no one else heard that she'd be wonderful. He noticed, too, that Marlo Hartwell's smile never once reached her eyes. He hadn't meant to notice that, but he had. The dinner rolled on the way these dinners always did. Speeches about legacy and giving back, applause that sounded more obligatory than felt, a slideshow of children the foundation had helped, projected 12 feet tall above heads that barely looked up from their phones. Ezra kept working. He refilled water glasses. He cleared dessert plates. He kept his eyes down, because eye contact with guests at events like this had a way of being read as forwardness, and forwardness had cost servers their jobs before. It was during the band's second set, when the dance floor filled with couples swaying beneath the chandeliers, that Marlo Hartwell did something nobody expected, least of all Ezra. She had just finished dancing with a senator's son who talked more about his portfolio than he did about her, and she'd excused herself the moment the song ended, walking not toward her father's table but toward the edge of the floor, where the waitstaff moved quietly along the wall. She stopped in front of Ezra, who was midway through refilling a glass of water, and she said simply, "Would you dance with me?" Ezra froze. He glanced quickly toward the maître d', toward the nearest security guard, toward anyone who might explain to him what was happening or tell him what was allowed. "Miss Hartwell, I don't think—" "Marlo," she corrected gently. "And I'm asking you, not ordering. You can say no." He should have said no. Every rule he'd ever been taught about this job told him to say no. But there was something in the way she asked, not the careless confidence of someone testing what she could get away with, but something quieter, almost pleading, like she was asking him to see her the way he'd been seeing everyone else all night. The tired violinist, the shaking hands at table 12. Like maybe, for one song, she wanted to be a person and not a name on a foundation letterhead. He set down his tray. The first few steps were clumsy, his hands unsure where to rest, hers guiding his shoulder with a patience that surprised him. But the band was playing something slow and old, and within half a minute they found a rhythm, and for a moment neither of them was thinking about trays or titles or the 300 people who had all, without quite realizing it yet, gone quiet, because that's what happens in rooms like that. Someone always notices first. A woman near the bar who elbowed her husband, a photographer who lifted his camera on instinct before his brain caught up with his hands, and then the silence spreads, the way silence always does, guest by guest, table by table, until even the band, sensing something had shifted, let the song trail into its final bars and stop. Desmond Hartwell had been mid-conversation with the hotel's general manager when the quiet reached him. He turned toward the dance floor and saw his daughter, his only child, the girl who had grown up mostly in the company of nannies and tutors because he had spent her childhood building An empire he told himself was for her. Dancing with a waiter neither of them had ever officially met. For a long moment, nobody moved. 300 people held their breath, waiting to see how a man like Desmond Hartwell would respond to his daughter's hand in the palm of a man-serving horse. D'oeuvre 20 minutes earlier. Desmond set down his glass. He walked toward the floor and the crowd parted the way crowds do for men like him. And Ezra felt his stomach drop with every step. Certain this was the end of a job he badly needed and possibly the start of some kind of public humiliation he'd remember for the rest of his life. But Desmond didn't stop in front of Ezra. He stopped in front of his daughter first. "Are you all right?" he asked her quietly. "I'm fine, Dad," Marlo said. "I just wanted one dance that wasn't about who my father is." Something in Desmond's face shifted then. Not anger, but recognition. The particular ache of a man realizing his daughter had been lonely in a way his money had never been able to fix. He turned to Ezra, and Ezra braced himself. "What's your name, son?" "Ezra Whitlock, sir." "How long have you worked events for this hotel?" 6 years, sir." Desmond studied him for a moment. "You're the one who brought old Mr. Callahan a different fork tonight." "Table 12. Ezra blinked, startled that anyone had seen. "Yes, sir." His hands. "I saw," Desmond said. "I make it a habit to watch the staff at my own events. Most people who work rooms like this are invisible to everyone in them. I've always found that a mistake," and he paused. "You didn't ask my daughter to dance." "No, sir. She asked me." "I know," Desmond said. "That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you wanted to say no." Ezra hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because lying to a man like Desmond Hartwell felt more dangerous than telling the truth. I thought about it. But she looked like she needed someone to say yes to her for once, instead of to her name." The silence that followed felt different than the one before. Not shocked, but something closer to understanding. Desmond Hartwell had built his fortune from nothing, a fact the tabloids liked to forget in favor of photographing his suits and his charity galas. He had grown up the son of a mill worker in a town not unlike the one Ezra had left behind, and somewhere between his first small business and his 100th $1 million, he had made peace with the idea that people would only ever see the money, never the mill town underneath it. Looking at Ezra now, he saw something he hadn't expected to find in that ballroom. Not a threat to his daughter's reputation, but a mirror of the boy he used to be, before any of this existed. "Finish your shift," Desmond said finally, and something like the ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Then come find me. I'd like to talk to you, not as an employee, as a person who apparently sees things the rest of my staff doesn't." The band picked back up. The room slowly returned to its low murmur of conversation, though every table now carried some version of the same whispered question. Who was that? And what just happened? What happened over the weeks that followed? Was this? Desmond didn't fire Ezra, and he didn't make some hollow gesture of promoting him simply to save face. Instead, he asked him questions about his town, his family, why he'd left, what he'd wanted to be before life narrowed his choices down to whatever paid the bills. He learned that Ezra had studied hospitality management for 2 years before his father's illness, pulled him out of school and into whatever work would send money home fastest. He learned that Ezra hadn't touched a classroom since, though he still read industry journals on his lunch breaks, still noticed everything about how a great hotel should run, with nowhere yet to put that knowledge to use. Desmond offered him a position in hotel operations, not out of charity, but because a man who noticed the small, invisible details of a room was exactly the kind of person his business had always needed and rarely managed to keep. Ezra took it cautiously at first, waiting for the catch that never came. Marlo and Ezra didn't fall into some rushed, sweeping romance the way people whispered they might. Instead, something steadier grew. A friendship built first, careful and unhurried. Two people who had each spent years being defined by circumstances outside their control, learning slowly what it felt like to be seen as themselves instead. When something more did eventually bloom between them, it did so quietly, the way real things usually do, far from ballrooms and chandeliers. A year later, at the same Whitmore Hotel, at the same foundation dinner, Ezra stood on the floor not with a tray in his hand, but in a tailored suit of his own, now the hotel's youngest operations director, standing beside Desmond as the two of them greeted guests together. Marlo found him near the edge of the dance floor once more, and this time when the band began to play, It was Ezra who held out his hand. "Same song?" she asked, smiling. "Same song," he said. "Different table." They danced, and this time, though the room noticed, nobody went silent. They simply smiled, understanding. Now what Desmond Hartwell had understood that first night, that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone else has trained themselves not to see, and that the measure of a person isn't found in what tray they're carrying, but in what they choose to notice while carrying it.